Well, hey Gundam Maniacs, welcome to another episode of Gundam Explained. In this episode, we're going to be looking at a sequel in Universal Century that goes far forward past G Savior, almost like a G Savior sequel, and it brings back the original Gundam. Provided by Zeonic Scanlations, link in the description below. The one-shot story that technically takes place after G Savior, see note about these colored pages later on in the thread. Originally serialized in the pages of Gunpla Ace back in 2017, this one shot was part of a contest that was offered. The colored pages that follow weren't serialized in the magazine and instead come courtesy of the parody magazine Ori Robo Mechanics P, which is a parody of Great Mechanics magazine. At any rate, I figure fans would enjoy this since not even everyone's favorite source of misinformation, the wiki, has anything on it. And interesting because someone says, is this our furthest point in UC or is the G Savior game still further than this? Probably the furthest point, to be honest. But the artist wasn't aware of Gaia Gear or G Savior when crafting it for the magazine. So how much of a sequel is it to G Savior and really just more of another story further on in Universal Century? Okay, so we're going to dive into the pages of the manga and then get into some more detail about the mobile suits, the original Gundam. As we can see here in this shot, the original Gundam without the head, because you remember what happens at the end of the 0079 Amuro Char sort of battle going on there. Target is on the move, the headless. It's the mobile suit the mechanical doll has activated. The ones piloting it are, and before we get to the next page, interesting they're calling it a mechanical doll. Yeah, far forward in the future, it's interesting to just think how language, the way things are described, would change. And with manga, I always forget left, right, left. Bear with me, please. The test subject 8. So there's a test subject named 8. And one of our staffers, Irma Surian. So here we're seeing the headless, but it looks like it's face slamming a Zaku, and we can see the extra repair on the arm, which is consistent, and some more slamming the hand right into the Zaku's face. I mean, that's kind of what the Gundam does, right? This damn bucket of bolts, doesn't this thing have a silent mode? Cut me a little slack, it's not like I've done this before. And so I guess the Irma we have here in the back, and 8 is in the foreground. Question mark? Irma, there's more of them coming at us from 3 o'clock. They're shooting at us. So it is interesting, though, in this, seeing things that look like a Zakuto, pretty much a Zakuto, this far in the future. Remember, it's 02 whatever, 0079. We get into the 100s, which is like F91, Victory, and then we get to the 200s, which is where G Savior starts. Yeah, we're seeing those little bullets flying here. Damn, the people in this city have no restraint. Irma, we've got to fight back. Where's the rifle? Looks like the hand's getting all shot to bits. Are you trying to turn the city into a battlefield? Look, war's already started. If we don't act, we're sitting ducks. Or do you think it's somehow noble to just sit back, change nothing, and blissfully wait to die? Okay, so they're kind of questioning their place in all this. Listen, it's not Ocarina of Time, but pretty cool to see the rifle, like, kind of repaired in a way. This thing's firepower matches a battleship's cannon, or maybe even more. We only need one shot. Make it count with a single strike. But that's just, there's no way I can aim that. Irma does have a point. Without manual control from the main camera, our chances are slim to none. Still. And then we have, could be a hand on the other hand, and we'll see maybe from this next page, there's some mist coming on. So is that like a Newtype hand that's kind of going over and controlling? You know, we've seen that happen in Gundam. That's right, it's not just about defeating today's enemy, it's also for the sake of protecting our future selves. Keep it together, 8. If you're a Newtype, you should be able to do this. So this is a Newtype story. When in, G Savior, for instance, they didn't really talk about Newtypes, but it could be that, Mark or whoever was a Newtype. He's trembling. Oh, I get it now, he's scared too. And I guess this is what Irma is thinking as her Newtype pilot is the one that's sort of trying to maybe help. It's very interesting. It's like a old type, a new type working together in the mobile suit. Leave this to me. Everything's going to be okay. And then we have, I guess, her hand on the main control, his hand on her hand, and then her other hand on top. Whatever. I can see it too, so I'll take the shot. Really cool shot here, seeing the OG Gundam in its sort of repaired mode, repaired gun, firing, and it's, I guess, causing the bandages wrapped up on it to kind of fly off. Zaku questioning its existence. High energy heat source detected. My suit can't withstand it. Revolution invariably breeds sacrifice at its fringes. The cycle of war is a relentless echo. throughout history. So I really like the way this looks with the beam going through the Zaku, showing it, melt. And remember how we saw in recently Requiem for Vengeance really did a good job with the CGI showing that off with the beam shots going through Zaku 2s. In this city sealed off from their own history. Okay, so it's a city sealed off from their own history. Nearly a century of peace has been diligently safeguarded. So that can explain a lot. That can explain why maybe they don't understand or how they're calling things dolls. I think that's a neat idea. And we've seen that in Gundam before, where there can be colonies or like offshoot civilizations that have been excluded from the mainline for a while. That happened in Double Zeta. Wasn't it the Moon that thing going on? And in Victory as well. I forget the name of all that. A woman wishes for nothing more than to live out her days in this city, seeking the same happiness as those who came before, while the boy dreams of tomorrow, setting his sights on the stars. And then we see, I guess, a blast. Universal Century 02XX. This is a story that reawakens the forgotten memories of a Gundam. Okay, very interesting. So let's look at a summary here. Revolution invariably breeds sacrifice at its fringes. The cycle of war is a relentless echo throughout history. So that's like the main thing here, which is, I guess, normal for Universal Century. So we're in line there. Humanity, unable to learn from its past, has sealed off its history. In this city, nearly a century of peace has been diligently safeguarded. Our story unfolds in a particular colony, one that has carved out its history after gaining autonomy from the Earth's governance in Universal Century 02XX. Born and raised in this city and now tasked with its protection, Irma, an employee of the Information Control Bureau, is a woman of conservative principles. This city teaches that happiness lies in unchanging continuity. And like her predecessors, she wished for a life lived and completed within its confines. Distortions arise even in such a setting. The Information Control Bureau was on the trail of a boy named 8, spreading the heresies of an older generation. The boy represented nothing less than a spark for antisocial movements in the eyes of the Bureau. In pursuit of 8, the Bureau deployed a colossal mechanical doll, a mobile suit. Irma, ever valuing conservation, began to question whether this was crossing a line. Following 8's trail, she found herself in an underground factory of the city. There, a headless white mechanical doll lay dormant. So, in a city, underground factory of a city is where this mechanical doll lay dormant. So I don't know if we're going to learn by reading this more. Was this maybe the original Gundam after everything had happened had been moved to another location, or could the city been built on top of an older generation, which happens in real life? According to 8, it was called a Gundam in the face of the Bureau's mobile suits, hell-bent on securing 8 with blatant disregard for the city's destruction. Irma's surging anger finally awakened the Gundam. Interesting. So 8, a boy estimated to be around 12 years old, had been in cryogenic sleep for over a century. Wow. So over a century. So this could be a test subject during maybe the Principality of Zeon at the Flanagan Institute, or, others, just like the Plague Clones, and how they have their numbers as well, and somehow maybe forgotten about. He claims to be a Newtype and often uses terminology from a bygone era. Yeah, that is really cool. After awakening, he found himself confined in an experimental facility by the Information Control Bureau, but managed to escape, becoming a fugitive. Currently, he lives with the children in the old city, the slums. Despite his small stature, he is quite energetic and speaks with a maturity beyond his years. With unique sensitivities of a new type and knowledge from the past era, he will have a significant influence on the children and Irma as the story unfolds. So yeah, here's 8. Yeah, very childlike there. With the color of the hair and the eyes, I guess that, being a unique look kind of helps with it being a new type, this character. And then we have Irma Surian. Looks like a normal person. We got a uniform going on there. Irma Surian, an employee of the Information Control Bureau. She is a model citizen who values conservatism and deeply believes in the teachings of her city. She was assigned the task of capturing the test subject 8 and was actively in pursuit. However, her trust in the organization begins to waver when she sees them using mobile suits, mechanical dolls that threaten the peace and breaks the city's taboos. Her encounter with 8 challenges her long-standing values and beliefs. Simultaneously, it awakens her innate abilities as someone living in space. So awakens her innate abilities as someone living in space. So that means, she's potentially a new type too, especially this far in the future of Universal Century, where we already saw this awakening of human beings in space. And that it could be that it's going to happen even more likely if you're in space for a long time or born in space. People living out can awaken abilities maybe under certain stress they could be. And I like the idea. Isn't that, something like Fast and the Furious, in that older Keanu Reeves movie, I forgot, where, someone has to go and track someone down, arrest them, take them in, whatever, but then starts to feel sympathy for them and what they're going through and sides with them. That's always an interesting take, and that makes sense with a Newtype. Now let's get a look at the Gundam in this, the main mobile suit they pilot, other than what was the OG Gundam mobile suit. So I don't know if that is then transformed into what we see here. Maybe we'll read more of that to figure that out, or if this is just a whole new mobile suit of that era. I really like the way it looks. It looks like something UC, but very futuristic. There's some late UC stuff that, seems to, come through here. I think a lot of it has to do with having this V-fin Gundam-like head, but still works. Has the vents in cool places. I mean, even the skirt armor, very, very Gundam. Mobile Suit Gundam Oblivion G, original work by Hajime Yatate, of course. Man, that guy's around everywhere. And Sakurai. All right, and considering we're reading this right to left, as one probably should in Japan, here's some more looks at the mobile suit here. This looks absolutely fantastic. There's a lot. I'm getting G-Line vibes from this. I'm getting Gustav Karl vibes. It evokes OG Gundam colors, but we're seeing the crest there, the Federation. And while it is said that this is a sequel of sorts to G Savior, it does seem like mechanically it is more in tune with, previous UC Gundam. But again, at that point of G Savior, when we have the G Savior unit itself that is made, while that does look Gundam-y in some ways, there are so many different little populations, organizations. The rivalry between the Earth and space is a little different now. And so I can always see that there would be different development paths, and some that could retain sort of that Anaheim Federation aesthetic, while others may be going down that SNRI and whatever other future mobile suit development that happens. All right, this is the Fragment Gundam. In its debut battle, the Headless was ravaged, later resurrected in an underground factory using space parts and contemporary tech. Today, no one recalls the true form of a Gundam, save for 8, whose vague guidance was all they had. The remnants were assembled like a puzzle, resulting in a form starkly different from its original self. The Gundam's iconic blade antenna, prone to damage, was discarded on the engineer's advice, leaving only the symbolic yellow hue. This patchwork repair, though improvised, showcased the technician's ingenuity, granting it agility surpassing that of the Information Control Bureau's mobile suits. In an age where beam technology has regressed, the beam saber's usage is finite, making kinetic firearms like nail guns the norm. Very interesting to hear all this, to think, and I've thought about this too. As we move forward in Universal Century, we get to a point by G Savior where the Earth is in shambles, and it's really, you're more successful out in space. The end of Unicorn, that was kind of full frontals thing, that cross whatever prosperity thing, the idea where the colonies can self-sustain. We get to a point, especially by G Savior, where the colonies are self-sustaining, and so Earth is trying to figure out a way where they can regrow crops again, and that was the use of, the biological stuff underwater in order to grow crops underwater. And again, I think it was like Consent was trying to then capture that or hide that technology. So it makes sense that they get the Gundam, and there's some interesting new technology that was used with the original Gundam that kind of got lost in the future. I think kind of the general idea of a mobile suit as a weapon of war was still used, but some of the technology maybe got lost as time went. So it is cool that they took the original Gundam, used it for a little bit without its head, called the Headless, and created this Fragment Gundam. And I guess the fragments were put together to make it what it is. But there's a lot of differences here, so I don't know how much is really the same, or a lot of what they designed based on that original Gundam informed the look of it to give it that Federation look I was talking about before. Actually, let me go back to this real quick. Here is the final battle version, which is even cooler. It goes back to getting the classic V-fin going on, and it's got the space thruster backpack. I love it when there's an upgrade with some space thrusters on the back. You could see here wing binders, thrusters. It looks futuristic, but evokes classic Universal Century. So I love the design principles here. Dude, I would totally buy a Metal Robot Spirits, a high grade, whatever. This is a neat, cool design. Final battle version. Following its initial skirmish, the Gundam's self-destructed beam rifle was meticulously restored, allowing it to once again showcase its inherent sniping prowess. What's more, it's been outfitted with a specialized backpack designed for space combat, boasting 4 stabilizers that move as freely as arms. This allows for an unprecedented level of flexible maneuvering. maneuverability. Now that sounds awesome. I love that idea. The thrusters are arm-like, like an octopus almost, where at any given moment as it's needing to move, it could kind of stabilize and help with it moving around. Let's look at some other details that could answer some of the speculation that I was just throwing out there. With the film's release on the horizon, anticipation is undoubtedly mounting. Could you share with us the journey behind this project and the intentions imbued in the work? Now, as far as I know, there's no film, unless they're talking about some other film, but it could be part of the parody of being a parody magazine, that this is like a what if it really happened sort of thing. It all started with an open call from a magazine, you know. The theme was an original Gundam story set in the Universal Century. When we talk about Gundam, it's generally divided into Universal Century and another. But the constraints of the Universal Century are surprisingly stringent. Even if we accept that it's a parallel world, creating something new in the gaps of that timeline is daunting. There's an overwhelming pre-existing narrative. Recently, side stories from periods like Double Zeta, Char's Counterattack, and Victory Gundam have been growing, so I wondered what to do. I decided to leap forward to the Universal Century's 200s. In this era, you've got things like Gaia Gear, G Savior, I learned about them later, funny enough, both positioned as possible offshoots of Gundam. Just saying Universal Century 200 carries a certain significance, making it easier to work with. I've always been more comfortable with original stories rather than fan fiction, so it's even better. Once I set the era, I pondered the possibilities then and there, and the idea of a generation that had forgotten Gundam came to mind. In the midst of Gundam growing not just as a series, but as a genre unto itself within the realm of robot-themed narratives, I started questioning the illusion that Gundam would continue on forever. Conversely, what if it was forgotten, known to none? That's the theme I wanted to explore in portraying Gundam. Characters in the story live in colonies, oblivious to Gundam, let alone mobile suits, but the appearance of a Gundam gradually triggers their memories. In a meta sense, this process of remembering alludes to past Gundams or deliberately betrays them, providing an insider's delight for viewers. The fragment Gundam is also a repaired mobile suit excavated in a colony, but before its restoration, unmistakably hints at that particular Gundam while also suggesting it might be something entirely different. I want core fans to see this as a fresh take, while casual fans come to recognize this is Gundam, both in the characters and the viewers. There's this narrative intent of remembering Gundam. Let's talk about the protagonist mech, the fragment Gundam. It has a unique design. Any anecdotes to share? The theme revolves around a generation familiar with Gundam restoring one. In its initial appearance, it's even called headless due to missing head, and its restoration relies solely on 8's memory, the only character familiar with Gundam. But that memory is vague. Like, it has 2 eyes, there's a horn, the chin is somewhat red, so the design consciously ended up entirely different from its original form before restoration. The head is newly made based on 8's memory, while the rest comprises repaired parts. It's true that you've deliberately deviated from the usual rules of Gundam part placement, like the positioning of the front skirt, the chest ducts, the cockpit, and so on, which is quite interesting. Initially, the coloring also broke away from the tricolor scheme while maintaining a good balance. The yellow section in the forehead is a painted representation of the horn, symbolic of Gundam. It's as if the mechanics compromised, assuming the horns, though deemed necessary by 8, would definitely break. However, in the final battle version, it remembers its usual colors and regains the horns, which that's cool. Tell us about the dual protagonists, 8 and Irma. 8 is the only Newtype who knows the Universal Century and serves as the story's guide. His tales of the past Universal Century are so far-fetched from the present that they're initially dismissed as tall tales. But with the appearance of the Gundam, his story slowly gained credibility. Irma is swept up in these developments, a central figure. Since it's a story about remembering Gundam, it progresses primarily from Irma's perspective. I aim to create drama by clashing 8, the Newtype advocating humanity's innovation, with Irma, who prioritizes conserving her immediate surroundings. Initially, in the project planning, Irma was conceived as a young man and 8 was a young girl. However, our supervisor commented that the motives were too transparent. Irma echoing Bright and 8 Amuro, okay, leading to a gender swap for both. That's when it struck me. Older girl, younger boy, this could work. Sure enough, reversing their genders oddly made the characters more endearing and facilitated the drama construction. The characterizations of a cheeky 8 and a stubborn Irma became clearer, I believe. And that is very interesting. What do you think makes them appealing? First, let's talk about Irma. She's portrayed as an average person representing the story's space colony. Unlike previous Gundam protagonists who have been depicted as new types, individuals with heightened senses, Irma is the antithesis. She cherishes old traditions, fears change, and seeks to protect her immediate surroundings. Though she resides in space, her mindset aligns more with Earthnoids, what you might call an old type. On the other hand, 8 exhibits the sensibilities typical of a Gundam protagonist. He clashes in Gundam flaunts this nature. There's a desire for self-validation in him derived from his Newtype status, combined with the sensibilities of modern youth. While he may jest about Irma being old-fashioned, he grapples with his identity, struggling to define himself beyond being a Newtype. Interesting. In terms of piloting the Gundam, it was more of a happenstance that Irma became the main pilot. She isn't particularly suited as a pilot. It's only with 8's support that she can barely match a Zaku. I doubt her stats would be of much use in a Super Robot Wars game. The comic did depict their initial battle as quite disastrous, not knowing about the beam saber and using the beam rifle as a blunt weapon. To demonstrate what it means to be unfamiliar with the Gundam, I've allowed Irma, despite her appearance, to make various blunders. Like that teaser scene where she inadvertently fires the beam rifle inside the space colony, piercing a hole through it. Ah, so that explains that part we saw in the comic. I wasn't too sure what was going on. The collective mutterings of, "she really did it now," from the audience really made me feel we nailed that moment. Speaking of character setups, the self-proclaimed Newtype 8 who escaped from a research facility, there's a certain ominous aura surrounding that name. Can you comment? 8 from the very first battle showcases matured Newtype abilities. He can project visions outside the cockpit to others, in this case Irma, and even sees control of their bodies. I took the liberties to amplify Newtype capabilities we've seen in prior Gundam series, ensuring they remain within the boundaries of believability. And there's a twist. He might not truly be a Newtype. There's a certain breadcrumb trail I've laid out. I might sound quite forthcoming here, but I've embedded multiple dues throughout the story for audiences to enjoy piecing together. Okay, so that's, that shot that we saw where it kind of melted through the Zaku, and that also broke through the colony, because they just don't know. It's just like with Amuro's first attack of the Zaku exploding in its nuclear reactor, piercing a hole through the colony. Could you expound on the organization opposing these two, the Information Control Bureau, and what instigated their pursuit? In the narrative, they are the custodians of the space colonies, though they originally branched off from the former Colony Public Corporation. The Information Control Bureau initiated extreme information restrictions, aiming to erase concepts altogether to prevent the recurrence of past war histories. They've severed ties with the clusters, also known as Side XX, reaching a near isolationist state. Through these measures, the Bureau's influence grew, valuing conservatism, culminating in a self-contained world within the colonies. However, the arrival of an outsider, 8, and the Gundam destabilizes what they've meticulously built. The Universal Century is set in motion once more, primarily by the younger generation. It's a classic structure, the Bureau striving to halt this progression. Different stage and circumstances, yet the unearthing of buried history. Did you draw inspiration from series like Gundam and G Reconquista? Sure, that's one way to put it. It might also closely align with the theme of de-Gundamization in the sense of unshackling what has been rigidified. Plus, then there's the fabricated piece in the closed environment of a space colony. It doesn't remind one of Gundam series as much as, say, Megazone 23. Has it become that apparent? I actually had that in mind from the beginning, even during the public solicitation stage. As for the finale, all secrets unravel, the colonies collapsing, culminating in a return to Earth. Could we be anticipating such a development? Well, who can say? Let's save the specifics for the theater experience. So this again goes back to, is this like a parody of, oh, hey, here's this, we've created a movie of the story that's coming out, which would be awesome. Why joke about it? Or was this a plan? I wasn't too sure from Diki Chu's tweets, although he did say it was a parody magazine that had this information. All right, the headless, let's get a good look at this. So it's really cool. The original Gundam with, I guess, even the blue down here on the feet. We see the repaired arm, shoulder missing, no head, just one beam saber, repaired gun. A white mobile suit that was dormant in the underground factory. Its head is lost and its left arm and cockpit have been repaired with parts from other mobile suits, earning it the nickname Headless. With a sword of light and a gun of light. That's a cool name. A machine that bears striking resemblance to the Gundam lost at Abawaku. It might not be the original, but possibly a replica. Later, with advancements from this era, it gets retrofitting its head among other parts. With both Irma and 8 combined, it culminates into a sharpshooter possessing the mightiest eye and the most formidable gun. The gun of light, aka the beam rifle, has been extended into a long barrel, tailored for sniping. However, due to its age and wear, it self-destructs upon a single shot, which we saw in the manga. Now, it's very interesting seeing these Zakus, but let's read this. Roku, I have one of those. Roku Shiki, Model 6, once referred to as a Zaku, prepared by the Information Control Bureau for quelling riots. To minimize collateral damage in urban settings, it primarily focuses on close quarters combat, employing a nail gun and an axe. So it's interesting at that far in the future, they're still building Zakus. So maybe somehow, some way, there were still the plans or the information on these Zakus, and just for the purpose of quelling, not like full-on combat in war, but just for quelling, they're like, okay, these Zaku 2s maybe could be cheap to produce and useful for that, maybe. All right, so that just about does it. That was very interesting to read, you know, a further story in Universal Century that goes beyond G Savior. The fact that we have a Newtype that had been in cryo since during maybe that whole, you know, Axis or Xeon and, you know, Federation time period, going beyond F91, beyond Victory, and beyond G Savior, and even bringing back the OG Gundam. To be honest, there's a lot of things there that, if fleshed out, could work well for a story. We have an older, and I say older because older than the boy, person that working for the Information Control Bureau that has to go and get this boy 8. This boy 8 happens to be a Newtype, and they happen to salvage this old Gundam that he's familiar with because he's been around during that time period. And for everything else in the world would be new, we would have characters reacting to the old concepts the audience would be familiar with, while we would have the character like 8 reacting to this new future world he's in where people don't recognize what's going on. And how are Newtypes recognized at that time? Because it seems like after, you know, late UC, even though, you know, especially what we see in Hathaway and sort of F91, I guess it's true. It's like the Newtypes are still talked about in a way, but it's very like under the table. It's not like out in the open. You know, you wonder if that is a coordinated effort by powers at B to just make sure that people aren't taking advantage of that, so they're not just popping up somewhere and then taking over or something like that. But I mean, it's a unique part of Universal Century having the Newtype, and I like how the author was talking about trying to keep it as believable as possible. But I think Gundam Universal Century has done a good job adding to like Newtype mythos and making it very interesting. I just love the designs. I would get a model kit of the headless, of the fragment Gundam, and then the final battle version. All of that stuff looks sick. It reminds me for some reason of like that Double Zeta prototype, and I have the Metal Robot Spirits. I would love to get like a Metal Robot Spirits of that final battle version. That looks so good. Anyway, let me know what you think below. Are you interested in these sort of sequels to Universal Century? I feel like they could keep going forward as we still get stories in the One Year War, and to be honest, I like it. I enjoy it. But it is a neat idea to be able to go far forward into the future, but bring back certain elements. And this whole stasis, cryo, or whatever that a character can be in, you know, from that sort of Xeon and Federation legacy into the far future. That's very interesting. Anyway, y'all, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think below, and thanks for all the supporters that make this possible. Also, check the links in the description for ways you can support the channel. Shout out to Art Rovo Gundam for making all of this possible. And yeah, check the link for the Discord. We have a lot of fun chatting in the Discord. So until next time, be cool.